So unless you've been living under a rock and not following anything that has been going on with the NBA, then you know that Damian Lillard has been traded to the Milwaukee Bucks as part of a 3-team deal in which Jrue Holiday, DeAndre Ayton, as well as some draft capital that went to the Blazers and Jusuf Nurkic, and depth pieces that went to the Phoenix Suns. I put out a reaction video shortly after the trade news broke here on the channel, and I mentioned how I wanted to do a deeper dive in how this trade potentially impacts the Chicago Bulls, specifically as it relates to Jrue Holiday, who will most certainly be on the move as he doesn't fit the Blazers' timeline of a rebuild. And when the news broke, that was initially what jumped out to me, aside from the shock of Dame actually getting traded to the Bucks, of all teams of course. And right away I said the Bulls have to be getting on calls with the Blazers ASAP to see what it would take to bring in Holiday, who would actually be an incredible fit for this Bulls roster on paper. But after letting the dust settle a bit, having some time to think about it more and studying the options and any potential trade deal for the Bulls, the question then became, how realistic is it for the Bulls to be a real front runner in landing Jrue Holiday? And that's what we'll be talking about in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bull Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, when you look at this trade in a vacuum and you see the kind of return the Blazers got for their franchise player, a superstar, one of the greatest scorers of this generation, you think, that's all they got? DeAndre Ayton, a first-round pick in 2029, and 2 pick swaps well out into the future, which they're probably not going to exercise because you'd have to think that the Bucks are still going to be better than the Blazers, and there would be no reason for the Blazers to swap a lesser pick with them. And while I do still think the return was fairly low for a player of Lillard's caliber, at the same time, getting Jrue Holiday in the deal was actually bigger than you think, because while yes, Holiday is older, he's 33, he's at the tail end of his career. He himself has said he plans to retire once his contract is up, which is in 2 seasons. Whether or not he'll actually stick to that is another story when you see big money potentially coming your way after your current contract. But despite his age, despite the fact that he might not be a long-term option for any team that trades for him, he still has a very unique skill set in the league and veteran leadership and savviness that a lot of contending teams would love to have as that one piece that puts them over the top into contention. Holiday, who is one of the better defenders in the NBA, 5-time All-Defensive honors, was first-team All-Defense last year, but is also coming off one of his best offensive seasons in his career, where he put up over 19 points per game on high efficiency and shot 38% from 3 on the most volume of threes that he's taken in his career at over 6 attempts per game. To combine that level of production on offense with also his already elite level defense makes him so incredibly valuable in any given trade regardless of his age. And for the Blazers, they know they're going to be having a bidding war on their hands for teams vying for Jrue Holiday. And so while the return for someone like Lillard might seem meh, if you add what they're potentially going to be able to get for Holiday with the overall trade package, it's actually a decent haul for them. It's not going to be the Rudy Gobert level kind of haul that the Jazz got, but I think we're past those days where teams are throwing out first-round picks like they're candy to try and get fringe-level all-stars. Teams aren't going to be making those same mistakes again like the Timberwolves and the Atlanta Hawks did. But as it relates to the Bulls, I mean, it's no secret. We already all know this. Ever since losing Lonzo Ball to his injury, it's been pretty clear as day the Bulls need an actual starting level point guard that can play high-level defense, play make, and shoot. And that's what they lost and missed most in Lonzo Ball. And it's what made them so great in that first half of the season before Lonzo got injured. Now, as much as I like Javon Carter and the signing, and he does fill in need from a defensive perspective and a shooting perspective, he's still not a playmaking point guard by any means, and he's certainly not the player Jrue Holiday is. Holiday averaged over 7.4 assists per game last season on less than 3 turnovers per game, one of the better assist to turnover ratios in the NBA. And he's great at turning defense into offense by pushing the ball quickly in transition, which is something Lonzo was also great at. And then of course the other piece, Holiday fits the Bulls timeline or whatever you want to call it, because the direction of this team is kind of all over the place, but given they're running things back and seemingly trying to still win now, getting a guy like Holiday fits the direction and actually improves the team on a whole. Now, would it make the Bulls a contender by simply adding Holiday? Probably not. And again, you're having to sacrifice future assets in order to get him, which I'll talk about in a second. And while getting Holiday would be an upgrade at the point for the Bulls, it is still temporary, a temporary move that isn't going to be winning you any titles. But as great as a potential fit of Jrue Holiday would be on this roster, is it even practical for the Bulls to be able to trade for him? Now, initially, when I put my quick reaction video out yesterday on the trade, just speaking off the cuff as the news broke, I mentioned it was probably still unlikely, but something like a package of Lonzo for salary matching purposes and giving Portland their first round pick back. And I think I also threw in Damian Terry because I thought Jrue Holiday was making much less money than he actually is. I thought it was in the range of $25 million, which Lonzo and Damian Terry would be enough to make the trade acceptable. But no, Holiday is actually going to be making close to $37 million next season, which is kind of insane. But knowing this, I hate to say it, but at $37 million, it's going to be incredibly difficult for the Bulls to pull off a trade in landing Jrue Holiday, just purely from a financial perspective and trying to match the outgoing salary. Because first of all, while I know we keep throwing out Lonzo's name because it's easy money to fill, that's still only $20 million though, so you still have to come up with $17 or so million after that. But second, and more importantly, you're talking about dead money on Portland's books for a player who very well may never play in the NBA again. If you're including Lonzo in the deal, you have to add some incentives for them to be able to actually take on that contract, which would include attaching picks, which the Bulls don't really have. But let's say for a moment the Blazers would be willing to take on Lonzo's contract. As an incentive, the Bulls gave them their pick back, their first round pick that they owe to us, even though it's not that value because it's lottery protected. But let's just say for a moment they would entertain that. Who else are you including? I've seen a lot of people say, well, you could throw in Patrick Williams in the deal. I mean, I know some people are down and out on Pat, but even if you are out on him, trading a young 21-year-old player who has years of his career left ahead of him, will hopefully only get better as a player and is a great two-way potential, to trade him and picks for Jrue Holiday, who potentially might only play in the NBA for another 2 seasons. From a salary perspective, it helps you because you're talking about close to $10 million for Patrick Williams' deal, but even then, you're likely going to have to throw in another player such as Damian Terry and Andre Drummond to make the money work. And for Pat, picks Damian Terry, who is still young, a first-round pick himself, and taking away one of the Bulls' only center depth pieces for Jrue Holiday, I just don't see it being worth it at that point. That's the other thing about including Pat in a deal. I mean, you're going to be bringing in yet another backcourt player and getting rid of another frontcourt piece, which is limited for the Bulls already. Yeah, you could include Alex Caruso, who I actually think the Blazers would take despite being an older player for their rebuild, but Caruso is worth more than that on the trade market if the Bulls actually wanted to move him than include him in a package deal with picks and another young player for Jrue Holiday. Now, why not include Coby White? Salary-wise, that helps when including Lonzo Ball's deal. He's young, scoring spark off the bench, fits the Blazers' timeline for a rebuild, but unfortunately, Coby White can't be traded until I believe December-January timeframe because the Bulls just extended him in free agency. So even trading Coby is out. The same would also be the case for Ayo and Vucevic, who were also recently extended. So it's really hard to find a path forward to where the Bulls actually have a viable shot at landing Jrue Holiday. The only way, and this assumes Jrue Holiday would actually be okay playing with the Blazers for a couple months, which I think we all know is not going to happen, not when there is going to be a hot market for him in the form of a trade, but the only way I really see this working, and it would be risking a good chunk of your already limited future for the Bulls for a couple years of Jrue Holiday, is if the Bulls traded Lonzo Ball, Coby White, and Ayo Dosunmu, again, once Ayo and Coby are eligible to be traded, as well as giving Portland their first round pick back. And honestly, that might not even be able to get it done. The Bulls would probably have to include their first round pick in either 2027 or 2029 with some light protections on it for the Blazers to really want to take that deal in Lonzo's contract, because the Blazers would likely get better offers from other contending teams for Jrue unless the Bulls included one of their own first round picks rather than shipping Portland's protected pick to them, which wasn't going to be conveying anytime soon anyway. But either way, it's a lot. It's a lot you would have to be willing to give up for Holiday, and the reason it becomes a lot is because you have to include so much outgoing salary that you end up sending out multiple players as a result of it. Do the Bulls really want to do away with Coby White after showing a lot of improvement from this past season? Do they want to give up on a young Ayo? Hell, even Lonzo? What if he comes back healthy? The last thing you want to do is bring in a player like Jrue Holiday. He makes you better to a point where you might see a second round exit, but then he retires. And then you see Coby, Ayo, maybe even Lonzo go on to have prosperous careers, or even Patrick Williams, depending on which trade scenario you look at. So while I would love to have Holiday on this team, I'm actually hoping somehow the front office can pull some kind of trade to get him here. The path just is not there. It's going to be incredibly difficult to execute to where it would still make sense for both sides. But I want to hear what you guys think though. What would you be okay with in trading for Jrue Holiday? Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.